Well, hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Lore channel. In this video, I'll speak to you about the unique differentiating idea that separates the Bitcoin Lore from all the other YouTube channels and Bitcoin content in general. The first thing that you have to realize about Bitcoin, and this becomes very obvious when people define it, is that they focus too much on the finance portion. Let me give an example. If Bitcoin is defined as the first cryptocurrency ever to focus on decentralized financing such that it enables people that are represented as peer-to-peer or node-to-node to exchange and engage in electronic cash transactions without the government or any government and any bank to get in the way, to act as an intermediary bridge between the two people transacting financially. So that is the definition. It is a good definition of what decentralized finance is. However, it doesn't take into account, and this is where one of the two unique added values of the Bitcoin lore brings to the picture. And what that is critical thinking. Critical thinking tells a person that Bitcoin is not just decentralized financing. Mind you, that 50% or more of channels are focused, laser beam focusing on Bitcoin is decentralized financing, which it is. However, what they fail to do, even when they focus on that, is not doing deep dives on the three properties, which is to say, a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of measurement. If they had done that, then they would fulfill the most simple obligation of understanding decentralized financing in terms of what Bitcoin really is. But having said that, it's also hardware and software. This is where critical thinking comes into the game. What do I mean by hardware and software? Besides being electronic cash, it's also a protocol, the SHA-256 protocol, which is a cryptography protocol as well as code. Bitcoin is written in C++, and there is a program that runs on nodes that are connected with each other called Bitcoin Core. Also, there's the hardware side of it. ASICs computers of today were the CPU and GPUs of yesteryear. So then, a great example of what the Bitcoin lore brings to the table is the critical thinking that's involved in properly understanding what Bitcoin is, which is to say, yes, it is decentralized finance, but it is also a hardware and software combination of code, protocols, as well as, let's not forget, electricity that comes in the form of, generally speaking, physics and energy. It is the intersection of many things coming together that gives an individual a proper understanding of what Bitcoin truly is. Now, having said that, there's a lot more to what the Bitcoin lore is. Lore is a story, the story of Bitcoin. But there's also your story, how you came about to discover Bitcoin and realize what it is. Bitcoin is a moving target, and as such, your understanding of Bitcoin, your understanding of critical thinking and emotional intelligence that we'll get to in a minute will continue to evolve. Having made this important distinction of critical thinking as it relates to Bitcoin, we will also do deep dives into critical thinking in general. After all, money plays a significant role in people's lives, as well as emotional intelligence. That's another thing that the Bitcoin lore brings to the table. That is to say, an example would help. There is the free fear and greed index. In that fear and greed index, there's the volatility of Bitcoin, which is the demand side as opposed to the supply side. Critical thinking will teach you that on the supply side, Bitcoin is issued very perfectly. That is to say, 50 Bitcoin in the first cycle, every 10 minutes, with mining that I didn't really get into, then 25, then 12, then 6, now 3, and in the future 1. Now, it's a lot more mathematically precise than that. It's not just 3, it's 3.125. So, this is just an overview, and so we're not getting into exact specificities of Bitcoin and its technical side, hardware, software, protocol code. Having said that, where emotional intelligence comes in is when you realize that greed and fear are what drive Bitcoin in terms of exchanges and people selling and buying Bitcoin. That is to say, when people get greedy, they see Bitcoin reaches an all-time high in a particular cycle, for example, October of 2025. And they say to themselves, fear of missing out, I'm going to buy a fraction of 1 or more Bitcoin. When they do that, they're buying it at the top of the price. Fast forward 6 months later, and it hits 20-30% lower than the all-time high of that particular cycle. Then FUD kicks in, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And when that kicks in, then people wind up selling at a loss. OMG, I bought BTC for 126 US dollars or whatever equivalent in whatever fiat currency. Now I've lost 50% of it. I'm just going to cut my losses and get out. So where emotional intelligence brings in clarity is the understanding that besides asking the right questions, imagining the right images, and getting the right answers, we have to take action. Taking that action involves emotional intelligence. That emotional intelligence is something where people don't realize that when they're initially shocked by the fear or the greed, then after a while that shock wears off and they laugh in the face of having made money or lost it. It brings into the picture the courage of your convictions. Now, these are things that require a deep dive, multiple, over the course of weeks and months. As I wrap up this introductory video, I would like to paint a realistic picture of the Bitcoin lore. There's Bitcoin and there's lore. The story of Bitcoin and your story and how they intertwine. I would like to welcome you and invite you to join our Bitcoin lore community, where we want to make a positive and deep and lasting impact on people's lives. I'll end with saying, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that this is something where you can watch a half-hour video of something, some famous person, and circumvent the hard task of doing hard work. So what happens with that emotionally is that people underestimate the gravity and the hard work that it takes. Then they're overwhelmed by how difficult it is, and then they give up. That's usually the case with people who've never read the white paper on Bitcoin from October 2008, nor studied the moving goalpost of Bitcoin in its 17 plus years at the time of recording. So we will do the hard work together. It will be something that will be amazing. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.